son. Did I kill those children, Jesus? Tell me!
Margaret's voice cracked as she knelt on the cold concrete, trembling. Part plea, part confession. The last person she ever expected to face in a death row cell was the only one who heard her. One word from him would either condemn her soul or expose the monster who had framed her. This is a story that will challenge everything you believe about wealth, redemption, and divine intervention. Margaret Hartwell spent 5 years waiting to die. And when only 48 hours remained, she made a request so audacious that even the hardened prison staff thought she had lost her mind. Prepare yourself to hear one of the most astonishing miracles ever recorded inside a death row facility. A story that transformed not only a condemned billionaire, but everyone who witnessed the impossible unfold before their eyes. But before we continue, I have just one question for you. What would you ask for if you had 48 hours left to live, and the truth was the only thing that could save you? Leave a comment, like and subscribe, and don't forget to tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I would love to see how far this message of hope is reaching. You know that sound money makes? Not the physical rustle of bills, but the silent hum of power, the whisper of influence, the echo of doors opening that remain closed to everyone else. Margaret Hartwell knew that sound intimately. She had orchestrated it for 35 years. At 60, Margaret was worth $8.7 billion. That's not a number that means anything until you understand what it represents. Private jets waiting on tarmacs. Senators returning calls within minutes. The ability to destroy a competitor's entire company with 3 phone calls. The kind of wealth where you stop seeing people as people and start seeing them as assets, liabilities, or irrelevant. They called her the Ice Queen of Silicon Valley. Forbes put her on the cover with the headline, "The Woman Who Never Blinks." She built Hartwell Pharmaceuticals from a small research lab into a global empire. She crushed rivals. She outmaneuvered regulators. She made shareholders billions. She also hadn't spoken to her children in over a decade. Thomas, 35, her oldest. Corporate lawyer. Brilliant, cold, exactly like she raised him to be. Rachel, 32. The broken one. In and out of rehab. Blamed Margaret for every needle, every pill, every destroyed relationship. Sarah, 28. The religious one. Missionary doctor in Kenya. Wrote Margaret letters for 3 years before giving up. Margaret never opened them. And James, 30. The angry one. Changed his last name at 18. Told a journalist once. My mother gave birth to me, but she was never a parent. She was a boardroom with a pulse. Margaret read that quote. Felt nothing. She had a pharmaceutical empire to run. Until March 17, 2019. That was the day the first lawsuit was filed. A mother in Ohio. Her 6-year-old daughter, Emma, had died suddenly of cardiac arrest. Emma had been taking Cardix LM, Hartwell Pharmaceuticals' blockbuster children's medication for a rare genetic condition. Then a second lawsuit. Connecticut. 5-year-old boy. Same drug. Same death. Then 10 more. Then 50. Then 127. 127 children. Across 14 countries. All taking Cardix LM. All dead from sudden cardiac events. All within an 18-month window. The FDA launched an investigation. The media descended like vultures. And then the documents surfaced. Internal emails. Research data. Clinical trial results showing cardiac risks in children under 12. Data that had been buried, hidden, filed away in archives marked confidential, executive eyes only. Margaret's name was on the approval chain. Her digital signature on the emails that pushed the drug through despite the warnings. Her face in the boardroom meetings where scientists raised concerns and were told to focus on market viability. The trial lasted 4 months. The prosecution painted her as a monster who sacrificed children for profit margins. The defense argued she was a visionary CEO who relied on expert teams. But those experts? They testified against her. They said she knew. They said she ignored them. They said she told them explicitly. We have $400 million invested in this launch. We're not pulling back now. Margaret sat through every day of the trial in her $5,000 suits, perfect hair, expressionless face. Even when they showed photos of the 127 children. Even when parents sobbed on the witness stand. Even when her own children came to watch, sitting in the gallery with hatred in their eyes. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. Guilty on all 127 counts of negligent homicide. Guilty on corporate manslaughter. Guilty on fraud. The judge, a woman with gray hair and steel in her voice, looked at Margaret and said, "You had every advantage, every privilege, every opportunity to do the right thing. Instead, you chose profit over precious lives. This court sentences you to death by lethal injection." The courtroom erupted. Some people cheered. Margaret's children sat frozen. And Margaret? She stood calmly, hands folded, and said nothing. Death row is not like you see in movies. There's no dramatic lighting. No philosophical conversations through cell bars. Just concrete, fluorescent lights that buzz constantly, and the knowledge that every single day brings you closer to the day you stop existing. Margaret adapted. She always adapted. That's how you build an empire. You assess. You strategize. You execute. Her cell was 8 feet by 10 feet. A metal bed frame with a thin mattress. A steel toilet. A small metal desk. 1 shelf. That was everything she owned now. Her $8.7 billion worth of assets? Frozen. Being liquidated for victim compensation. Her penthouse in Manhattan? Seized. Her art collection, her cars, her island villa in the Mediterranean? Gone. She had 3 jumpsuits, 1 pair of prison-issue shoes, and a toothbrush. From Billionaire to prisoner number 4-7-2-9-1 in the span of 9 months. The other inmates left her alone. Everyone knew who she was. The child killer. The rich monster. Some women in prison find religion. Some find friendship. Some find redemption. Margaret found nothing. She read legal documents. Filed appeals. Worked with lawyers who charged $800 an hour to tell her what she already knew. The evidence was overwhelming, the appeals were pro forma, and the outcome was predetermined. 1 year passed. Appeal denied. 2 years. Appeal denied. 3 years. Her legal team quit. There's nothing left to argue, Ms. Hartwell. I'm sorry. For years. Rachel sent a letter. Margaret opened this one. It said, "I hope you rot in hell for what you did. You destroyed those families the same way you destroyed ours. When they execute you, I'll be there watching." 5 years. Margaret turned 60 in her cell. No cake. No cards. Just another Tuesday in February. She had stopped filing appeals. Stopped reading legal documents. Stopped doing anything except waiting. Have you ever waited to die? Not from illness or age, but waiting for a specific date when the state would deliberately end your life? It does something to you. It hollows you out. Makes you a shell. And then on October 23rd, 2024, the final notice came. 48 hours. Guard Patricia Dawson, a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and a permanently tired expression, appeared at Margaret's cell at 9 a.m. "Hartwell, warden needs to see you." Margaret stood. She knew what this was. She'd been expecting it. In a strange way, she almost felt relieved. 5 years of waiting was finally over. The warden's office smelled like burnt coffee and paper. Warden Jenkins, a man who had worked in corrections for 28 years and had overseen 14 executions, sat behind his desk with the final paperwork. "Ms. Hartwell," he said, and there was something almost gentle in his tone. Not sympathy, just human decency. "Your execution date has been set. December 12th, 6 p.m. 48 hours from now." Margaret nodded. "I understand. You're entitled to a last meal request, spiritual counsel, and 1 final visitor session. The chaplain will be available if—" "I want to see Jesus Christ." Warden Jenkins stopped mid-sentence. "I'm sorry, what?" "I want to see Jesus Christ. That's my request." "Ms. Hartwell, if you mean you'd like to speak with Father Morrison, our Catholic chaplain, or reverend. No. Margaret's voice was calm, clear, absolutely certain. I don't want a priest. I don't want a chaplain. I want to see Jesus Christ. Himself. In person. The warden exchanged a glance with Guard Dawson. Ms. Hartwell, are you feeling all right? Do you need medical evaluation? I'm perfectly lucid, Warden. I'm not having a breakdown. I'm not trying to delay the execution. I'm making my request. You asked what I wanted. That's what I want. That's not something I can arrange. Then I'll wait in my cell and see if he comes anyway. Margaret stood. Are we finished here? Warden Jenkins didn't know what to say. In 28 years, he'd never had anyone make a request like this. Ms. Hartwell, I think we should have the psychiatrist. I'll pass any evaluation you require. But my request stands. She was escorted back to her cell. Word spread quickly through the prison. The Ice Queen had finally cracked. She thought Jesus was going to show up in her cell. The guards whispered about it. The other inmates laughed. Even the chaplain, when he heard, shook his head sadly. But Margaret wasn't laughing. She sat on her metal bed, staring at the concrete wall, and for the first time in 5 years, she felt something she hadn't felt since before the trial. Certainty. She didn't know why. She didn't understand it. But somewhere deep in her chest, in a place that had been frozen solid for decades, something told her, he's coming. That afternoon, at 3:47 p.m., 44 hours before execution, Guard Dawson appeared again. Hartwell, you have a visitor. Margaret looked up, confused. I didn't request anyone. She requested you. Says she's your daughter. Margaret's heart did something it hadn't done in years. It stuttered. Which one? Sarah Hartwell. Sarah, the missionary. The one Margaret hadn't seen in 13 years. The one who wrote those letters Margaret never opened. The one who, according to investigators, spent her days treating malaria patients in rural Kenya and her nights praying for people who couldn't afford medicine. The visitation room was small, divided by thick plexiglass, with phones on each side for communication. When Margaret walked in and saw Sarah sitting on the other side, she almost didn't recognize her. Sarah was thin. Too thin. Her hair was longer, pulled back in a simple braid. She wore a faded blue dress and sandals. Her hands were calloused, scarred, the hands of someone who worked with them every day. But her eyes, those were the same eyes Margaret remembered from when Sarah was 7, looking up at her, asking Mommy, will you come to my school play? Margaret had missed that play. Board meeting in Tokyo. They sat down, picked up the phones simultaneously. For 10 seconds, neither spoke. Then Sarah said, I had a dream. Her voice was hoarse, raw, like she'd been crying for hours. Maybe she had. 3 nights in a row, Sarah continued. The same dream. Jesus appeared to me. He didn't say much. Just one thing. Your mother will call my name, and you must be there to witness what I will do. Margaret's hands tightened on the phone. I didn't want to come, Sarah said, and tears began sliding down her face. Do you understand that? I didn't want to see you. I spent 13 years trying to forgive you for never being a mother, for choosing money over us, for missing every birthday, every graduation, every moment that mattered. And then you killed those children. 127 babies, Mom. How do I forgive that? Margaret's throat closed. She couldn't speak. But I can't ignore him, Sarah whispered. When Jesus tells you to do something, you do it. Even when it hurts. Even when you don't want to. So I flew 23 hours to get here. I left patients who need me. I left a clinic that's falling apart. I came because he told me to witness something. Sarah, Margaret finally managed, and her voice cracked on the word. I didn't kill those children. Sarah's face hardened. Don't lie to me now. The evidence. I didn't kill them. Margaret's voice rose, and she saw other visitors glancing over. She lowered it. I didn't kill them, Sarah. I was framed. My business partner, David Kane. He's the one who buried the research. He forged my digital signature. He used my company to commit murder while I was too blind, too arrogant, too focused on profits to see it happening under my nose. Then why didn't you prove it? Because I can't. The words burst out of Margaret, raw and desperate. The evidence is perfect. He spent years setting me up. Every trail leads back to me. My lawyers couldn't break it. The FBI couldn't find the real trail. I've spent 5 years trying to prove my innocence, and I can't. No one believes me because why would they? I'm the Ice Queen. I'm the woman who chose boardrooms over her own children. Why wouldn't I sacrifice other people's children for money? Sarah stared at her mother through the plexiglass. Are you telling me the truth? I swear on your life, Sarah. On all my children's lives. I didn't murder those babies. But I am guilty. I'm guilty of building a company with no soul. I'm guilty of trusting a monster because he made me richer. I'm guilty of being so obsessed with power that I didn't see the evil happening in my own boardroom. Those children died because of the empire I built. Their blood is on my hands through negligence, through blindness, through greed. But I didn't kill them. The visiting room was silent except for the murmur of other conversations. Sarah closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had shifted. I brought you something. She held up a small wooden cross. Simple, unvarnished, tied to a leather cord. I left this at the prison gate 3 years ago with a note. Did you ever get it? Margaret shook her head. The note said, I pray for your soul, not your innocence. Because I didn't believe you were innocent. But I believed your soul could still be saved. Sarah's voice broke. I'm going to leave this cross at the front desk again. If they let you have it, take it. And when you call his name tomorrow night, hold it. Because he's coming, Mom. I don't know what he's going to do. But he's coming. The guard announced 5 minutes remaining. Sarah, Margaret said urgently. I need you to do something. In my cell, I wrote down chemical formulas. Compound X7. It's the current version of the drug David released after taking over my company. It's killing children right now. The same way. But it's being misdiagnosed as genetic conditions. I need you to get those papers to someone who can test them. A pharmaceutical chemist. Anyone who. Time's up, the guard said. Sarah stood. I'll try, Mom. I promise I'll try. And Sarah. Margaret pressed her hand against the plexiglass. Sarah mirrored it on her side. I'm sorry. For every missed birthday. Every forgotten promise. Every time I chose anything over you. I'm sorry. Sarah nodded, tears streaming. I forgive you. Then she was gone. Margaret was escorted back to her cell. When she got there, Guard Dawson handed her a small wooden cross on a leather cord. Your daughter left this at the desk. Warden approved it since it's your last day tomorrow. Margaret took the cross. It was rough, imperfect, made by hand. She held it against her chest, and for the first time in 5 years, Margaret Hartwell cried. They came for her at 5 p.m. 25 hours left. Last meal request, Hartwell. What do you want? Margaret looked up at Guard Dawson. Paper. And a pen. As much as you can bring me. Dawson frowned. You're supposed to order food. I'm not hungry. I need paper and a pen. Dawson disappeared. Came back with a legal pad and 2 ballpoint pens. This is all I can get you. Margaret took them, sat at her small metal desk, and began to write. Not a confession. Not a goodbye letter. Not a will. Chemical formulas. Molecular structures. Metabolic pathways. Everything she had learned in 35 years of running a pharmaceutical empire. Everything she knew about how drugs interact with developing cardiovascular systems in children. Everything she had pieced together about what David Kane had done. Compound X7 was brilliant in its evil. It metabolized normally in adults. Completely safe. But in children under 12, whose hearts were still developing, whose electrical pathways were still forming, it caused a delayed reaction. 6 months after starting the medication, sudden cardiac arrest. Untraceable. Looked exactly like a genetic anomaly. David had released it 18 months ago. That meant children were dying right now. And no one knew why. Margaret wrote for 3 hours straight. Her hand cramped. She kept writing. She filled 47 pages of dense technical notes, diagrams, calculations. At 8 p.m., Guard Dawson came to collect the untouched dinner tray. She saw Margaret hunched over the desk, writing furiously. Hartwell, what are you doing? Margaret didn't look up. If Jesus doesn't come tonight, someone needs to know the truth about what's killing children right now. Take these papers. Keep them safe. Give them to someone who can test them. Margaret. Dawson used her first name for the first time ever. You need to eat something. You need to. I need to finish this. Margaret's voice was steady but urgent. Patricia, my daughter Sarah is trying to get these formulas to someone, but I don't know if she can. You have a daughter, don't you? Dawson went still. How did you know that? You wear a bracelet. Mom with a birthstone. April. Which means she's turning, 9 this year? She just turned 9. Does she take any daily medications? Dawson's face went pale. She has a heart condition. Genetic, they said. She's been on medication for it for about 7 months now. Margaret's pen stopped moving. She looked up, and her eyes were blazing. What medication? I don't remember the exact. Patricia, what medication? Cardiac something. The doctor said it's the newest treatment. Very safe. Just came out last year. Margaret stood so fast her chair scraped against concrete. Take your daughter off that drug. Today. Right now. Call your husband, your mother, whoever has her. Take her off it immediately. What? Why? The doctor said. Because it's going to kill her. Margaret's voice echoed through the cell block. In about 3 weeks, maybe 4, she's going to have sudden cardiac arrest. And the doctors will say it was genetic. And you'll never know that it was murder. Dawson stared at her. You're insane. Take these papers. Margaret shoved the legal pad at her. Please. Take them. Give them to your daughter's cardiologist. Tell him to test the metabolic pathway I outlined on page 23. Tell him to look for cumulative potassium channel disruption. He'll understand. And if I'm wrong, you've wasted an hour of his time. But if I'm right, you'll save your daughter's life. Dawson took the papers with shaking hands. If you're lying to me, I'm a lot of things, Patricia. I'm a terrible mother. I'm an arrogant fool. I might be a murderer by negligence. But I'm not a liar. And I'm not wrong about chemistry. It's the only thing I was ever truly good at. Dawson left with the papers. Margaret sat back down, picked up the wooden cross from her desk, held it in both hands. 22 hours left. Margaret didn't sleep. How could she? Tomorrow at 6 p.m., the state would inject 3 chemicals into her veins. The first would make her unconscious. The second would paralyze her lungs. The third would stop her heart. She had read the protocol. She knew exactly what would happen. Margaret Hartwell always did her research. At 11:30 p.m., she heard sounds from the other cells. Women whispering. Someone crying. Everyone knew what tomorrow meant. Margaret sat on her bed, back against the concrete wall, holding the wooden cross. She looked at it in the dim light from the corridor. It was so simple. Just 2 pieces of wood, bound together with wire. Sarah must have bought it from a market in Kenya. Or maybe she made it herself. Her daughter. The one she barely knew. The one she had failed most completely because Sarah had needed her mother's love, and Margaret had given her nothing but missed moments and broken promises. Jesus, Margaret said aloud. Her voice sounded strange in the empty cell. She had never prayed in her life. Her parents were atheist professors. She was raised on logic, science, empirical data. Prayer was for the weak, for people who couldn't control their own destinies. But she was about to die, and control was an illusion she no longer held. Jesus, she said again, stronger this time. I don't know if you're real. I don't know how this works. I spent 60 years building an empire on spreadsheets and clinical trials, on things I could measure and control. But Sarah believes in you. She crossed the world because you told her to. So I'm asking, did I kill those children? Silence. I need to know the truth before I die, Margaret whispered. Not the truth the jury decided. Not the truth the evidence shows. The actual truth. Did I murder those babies? Or was I just too blind to see what was happening in my own company? The cell was quiet except for the constant buzz of fluorescent lights. If you're real, I need. The lights went out. Not just in her cell. The entire block. Complete darkness. Then came the cold. Not regular cold. Impossible cold. Margaret's breath came out in visible clouds. The temperature dropped so fast she could feel it, like being plunged into ice water. "What?" she started to say. And then she saw the light. It didn't come from the corridor. It didn't come from outside. It came from inside her cell, from the corner, growing brighter with each second. Not harsh like the fluorescence. Soft. Golden. Warm. Like candlelight, but impossibly bright. Margaret's heart stopped. A man stepped out of the light. He wasn't floating. He wasn't glowing with halos or surrounded by angels. He was just standing there, wearing simple clothes, dark hair, beard, carpenter's hands, rough and calloused, eyes that held something Margaret had never seen in any human face, infinite sorrow and infinite love existing simultaneously in the same gaze. And the smell. Oh God, the smell. Not roses like in fairy tales. Sawdust. Olive oil. Something ancient and earthy and real. "Margaret," he said. Just her name. One word. And she knew. She knew. Margaret fell off the bed onto her knees, the wooden cross clutched in her hands. "You're real," she gasped. "You're actually real." "I have always been real," he said, and his voice was like water and like stone and like the wind and like silence all at once. "Did I kill them?" The question burst out of her. "Did I kill those children? Tell me the truth. Please. I need to know before I die." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he knelt down. The Son of God knelt on the concrete floor of a death row cell and reached out his hand. "Do you truly want to see the truth?" he asked. "All of it?" "Yes," Margaret said. "Yes, please." He touched her forehead. The world exploded. Margaret was no longer in her cell. She was in her old boardroom. 5 years ago. She was watching herself, her past self, sitting at the head of a mahogany table. David Kane was presenting. David, her trusted business partner. David, who had helped build Hartwell Pharmaceuticals into a global empire. David, who was showing slides on the clinical trial results for Cardix LM. "Phase 3 trials show excellent results," past David was saying. "Minor side effects, well within acceptable parameters." Past Margaret was nodding, checking her phone, half listening. But present Margaret, in the vision, could see what she had missed. David's laptop screen. For just a split second as he switched slides, she saw it. Another folder opened behind the presentation. A file labeled trial_results_actual_archive. She saw numbers. Cardiac events. Children. Fatal outcomes. "No," Margaret breathed. "I didn't see that. I wasn't looking. I was." The vision shifted. Now she was in David's office. Late at night. David was on her computer, her logged-in computer, sending emails. Approving the drug for market. Using her digital signature, her access codes. Codes he had obtained by sleeping with her executive assistant, Jessica, who had access to everything. The vision shifted again. David meeting with FDA officials. Offshore bank accounts being opened. Not in his name. In Margaret's. Funneling bribes through accounts that would trace back to her if anyone investigated. Shift. David in a restaurant, meeting with pharmaceutical distributors. "Once the drug is on the market and we've made our profit, we'll discover a problem in approximately 18 months. We'll release a fix. We'll be heroes. The stock will soar. And if anyone gets blamed for the initial issues." He smiled. "Well, that's what CEOs are for." The man across from him laughed. "And Margaret doesn't know?" "Margaret knows what I tell her. She's brilliant with chemistry, but naive about people. She actually trusts me." Shift. The children. Margaret was forced to see them. All 127. Emma from Ohio, who loved drawing horses. Lee from Taiwan, who wanted to be an astronaut. Michael from Germany, who played violin. Every single one. Their faces. Their lives. Their dreams. And their deaths. She felt every one. The sudden pain in their chests. The confusion. The fear. The way their hearts stopped, electrical signals misfiring, potassium channels disrupted, and cardiac muscle failing. She felt their mother's grief, their father's rage, their siblings' confusion. She experienced every funeral, every grave, every family destroyed. It was unbearable. Margaret screamed. The vision ended. She was back in her cell, on her knees, sobbing. Jesus was still kneeling beside her. "I didn't kill them," she gasped through tears. "But I'm guilty. I'm so guilty. I was so focused on market share, on quarterly earnings, on crushing competitors that I didn't see the monster I was working with. I didn't look closely enough at the data. I signed off on things without reading them carefully. I trusted him because he made me richer. Those children died because I built a company with no soul. A company where profit mattered more than people." "Yes," Jesus said simply. "I'm guilty," Margaret repeated. "Maybe not of murder, but of the sin that made their deaths possible. Of greed, of blindness, of arrogance. Yes, I deserve to die for that." Jesus looked at her with those infinite eyes. "Every human deserves death for their sins. That is why I came. That is why I died. Not to excuse sin, but to offer redemption to those who truly repent." "How can I repent?" Margaret's voice broke. "How can I make this right? I die in 18 hours. What can I possibly do?" "You have already begun," he said. "You warned the guard about her daughter. You wrote down the truth about Compound X7. You humbled yourself before your children. These are the first steps. But it's not enough. I can't bring back the 127 children. I can't undo 5 years of their family's suffering. I can't." "Margaret," his voice stopped her. "You are correct. You cannot undo the past. But I can use your future if you surrender it to me." "What future?" "I die tomorrow." Jesus smiled then. Not a happy smile. A smile that held sorrow and power and certainty all at once. "You will not die tomorrow. You have work yet to finish. But first, you must lose everything you still cling to. Only then can you become who you were meant to be." "I don't understand." "You will." He stood. "Tell your daughter I heard her prayers. Tell the guard her daughter will live. Tell the warden I walked through these walls to see you. Some will believe. Some will not. But the truth will be revealed when the time is right." "Wait." Margaret reached out, but he was already fading. "What do I do? How do I?" "Love your children. Serve the suffering. Use your knowledge not for empire, but for healing. The rest will unfold as it should." The light faded completely. The fluorescent lights flickered back on. Margaret was alone in her cell, kneeling on the concrete, clutching the wooden cross so tightly it left marks in her palms. But the smell remained. Sawdust and olive oil. Impossible. Real. And she felt warm. Despite the cold cell, despite the concrete, despite everything, she felt wrapped in warmth. For the first time in 5 years, Margaret Hartwell felt peace. Guard Dawson came running at 6 a.m., hours before her shift started. "Hartwell." She was breathless and wild-eyed. "What the hell did you do?" Margaret looked up calmly from her bed where she'd been sitting, holding the cross, waiting for morning. "What do you mean?" "My daughter. I took her to the ER last night after my shift. I told the cardiologist what you said. He ran tests. Immediate tests." Dawson gripped the bars of the cell. "Her potassium channels are disrupted. Exactly like you said. He said if she'd stayed on that medication for another month, she would have died. He said you saved her life." Margaret closed her eyes, feeling tears of gratitude. "Thank God. He wants to see your formulas. The complete analysis. He contacted the CDC an hour ago. They're taking this seriously." "Good. That's good." Dawson stared at her. "Hartwell, why does your cell smell like wood?" "What?" "Sawdust. It smells like sawdust. Like someone's been building furniture in here." "How is that possible?" Margaret smiled. A real smile. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. Jesus Christ visited me last night. He showed me the truth about what happened 5 years ago. He told me I wouldn't die today." Dawson blinked. Then she laughed. A short, disbelieving bark of laughter. "Right. And I'm the Pope. Believe what you want, Patricia." But your daughter is alive because he answered a prayer. Mine and my daughter Sarah's. Think about that. Dawson shook her head, still smelling the inexplicable sawdust, and walked away muttering. At 8 a.m., the warden came himself. Hartwell, you need to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Your request to see Jesus Christ, combined with the guards reporting strange smells and temperature drops in your cell last night, suggests you may be experiencing a mental health crisis. I'm perfectly sane, Warden Jenkins, but send your psychiatrist if you'd like. I'll pass any test you require. The psychiatrist came at 10 a.m. Dr. Vincent Marquez, 30 years of experience evaluating prisoners. He spent 2 hours with Margaret. Cognitive tests, mental status examination, assessment for delusions, hallucinations, and psychotic breaks. At noon, he filed his report. Patient is lucid, oriented, and cognitively intact. No evidence of psychosis or mental deterioration. Competent for execution. But he added a note at the bottom. However, patient demonstrates unusual peace for someone 8 hours from death. Effect incongruent with the situation. Recommend continued monitoring. At 2 p.m., 6 hours before the scheduled execution, something else happened. Sarah appeared at the warden's office with a man in a suit. My name is Dr. Robert Kimura, the man said. I'm a pharmaceutical chemist at Johns Hopkins. This young woman brought me chemical formulas allegedly written by Margaret Hartwell. I've spent the past 14 hours analyzing them. Warden Jenkins sat up straight. And they're correct. Frighteningly correct. Hartwell has documented a complete forensic analysis of how compound X7, the current formulation of Cardix LM released by Hartwell Pharmaceuticals 18 months ago, causes delayed cardiac arrest in children. This isn't speculation. This is meticulous scientific documentation. What does that mean? It means children are dying right now. And Margaret Hartwell knew about it. Which suggests, Dr. Kimura paused, which suggests either she was involved in something even worse than we thought, or she's telling the truth about being framed, Sarah finished. The warden shook his head. Even if that's true, we can't stop an execution without a court order. The legal process. I've already contacted the FBI, Dr. Kimura interrupted. They're investigating. But warden, if Margaret Hartwell dies today, we lose the only person who fully understands this compound. The only person who can help us stop more children from dying. Jenkins looked at the clock on his wall. 2:17 p.m. 3 hours and 43 minutes until execution. I need a court order to halt this. Without that, my hands are tied. Sarah stepped forward. Then call the governor. Call someone. Because Jesus Christ himself told my mother she wouldn't die today. And I believe him. The warden stared at her like she'd lost her mind. But something in Sarah's absolute certainty made him pick up the phone. At 3 p.m., 3 hours before execution, Margaret was moved to a holding cell adjacent to the execution chamber. Standard protocol. She could hear the preparation happening in the next room. The gurney being tested. The 4 lines being checked. The chemicals being measured. She sat on the metal bench, holding the wooden cross, praying. Real prayer now. Not the desperate bargaining of someone who wants something, but the quiet conversation of someone who has found peace regardless of outcome. If I die today, she whispered, I trust you have a reason. If I live, show me what you want me to do with the time I have left. At 3:30 p.m., her 4 children arrived. All of them. Together. For the first time in 15 years. They were led to the witness room, the small chamber with a window looking into the execution room. They would watch their mother die from there. That's what they'd come for. Some to see justice done. Some to say goodbye. Some because they didn't know what else to do. Thomas, in his expensive suit, jaw clenched. Rachel, shaking, sober for 6 months now but barely holding it together. James, who had changed his last name from Hartwell to Brennan, arms crossed, face hard. And Sarah, still in her faded blue dress, clutching a rosary, praying silently. They didn't speak to each other. They just sat on the benches in that small room and waited. At 4 p.m., 2 hours left, the warden received a call. He listened. His face changed. He hung up and immediately called for his deputy warden. "We have a situation. The FBI wants to speak with me. Now." At 4:15 p.m., Special Agent Linda Torres arrived at the prison with 2 other agents and a woman Margaret's children didn't recognize. At 4:30 p.m., 90 minutes before execution, the warden called an emergency meeting with the governor's legal counsel via video conference. In the holding cell, Margaret heard increased activity. Raised voices. Running footsteps. Something was happening, but she didn't know what. She prayed, "Your will, not mine." At 5 p.m., 1 hour left, Guard Dawson appeared at Margaret's holding cell. Her face was pale. "Hartwell, something's happening. I don't know what, but," she stopped. "There are FBI agents here. And some woman just walked in and asked to confess something." Margaret's heart began to race. "Confess what?" "I don't know. They won't tell me. But she's in with the warden now." At 5:15 p.m., 45 minutes before execution, David Kane was sitting in his Manhattan office, 47 floors above the city, celebrating. Margaret Hartwell would be dead in 45 minutes. The last loose end would be tied up. His plan, 5 years in the making, would be complete. He poured himself a scotch, smiled, raised the glass toward the window. "To the Ice Queen. May she rest in." His office door burst open. FBI agents. 6 of them. "David Kane, you're under arrest for 127 counts of murder, corporate fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and falsifying evidence. You have the right to remain silent." The scotch glass fell from David's hand, shattering on the marble floor. At 5:30 p.m., 30 minutes before execution, the woman sitting in the warden's office finished her confession. Her name was Jessica Torres. She had been Margaret's executive assistant 5 years ago. She was 39 now, thin, sickly. She had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Weeks left to live. "I helped David Kane frame Margaret Hartwell," she said, and her voice was steady despite the tears. "He promised me experimental cancer treatment if I helped him. I gave him access to Margaret's computer. I gave him her passwords. I helped him forge her digital signature on the approval documents. I knew she was innocent. I've known for 5 years." The warden stared at her. "Why are you confessing now? Why today?" Jessica looked at him with hollow eyes. "Because 3 nights ago I had a dream. Jesus Christ appeared to me. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me. And I saw myself reflected in his eyes. I saw what I had become. What I had done. And I couldn't." She broke down. "I couldn't let an innocent woman die for my cowardice. I'm dying anyway. I'm going to meet him soon. And I can't face him knowing I let Margaret die for David's crimes." Special Agent Torres stepped forward. "We have Jessica's testimony. We have the documentation she provided showing how David Kane orchestrated the frame-up. We have forensic evidence from Margaret's formulas proving the current drug is dangerous. And we just arrested David Kane in Manhattan. He's being transported here now." The warden looked at the clock. 5:34 p.m. 26 minutes. "Can you get me a court order to halt the execution? We're working on it. But the legal process. I need it in 26 minutes or Margaret Hartwell dies." At 5:45 p.m., 15 minutes left, Margaret was escorted to the execution chamber. Her hands and feet were shackled. She walked slowly, calmly. Guard Dawson walked beside her, and Margaret saw tears in the guard's eyes. "Patricia," Margaret said softly. "It's all right. Whatever happens, it's all right." "You saved my daughter's life," Dawson whispered. "You're not supposed to be the one dying." They entered the chamber. The gurney waited. Cold. Metal. Sterile. Margaret lay down on it. Technicians began strapping her arms down, her legs, her torso. She didn't resist. She looked up at the ceiling and prayed silently. Through the window, she could see her 4 children, all of them with tears streaming down their faces now. Even Thomas. Even James. She mouthed words to them. "I love you." At 5:50 p.m., 10 minutes left, The 4 lines were inserted into both arms. Margaret felt the cold needle slide into her vein. She watched the saline solution begin dripping. The warden stood in the corner of the chamber, his hand on his phone, waiting, praying for it to ring. At 5:55 p.m., 5 minutes left, the phone in the warden's office rang. His deputy warden answered, listened. His face went white. He ran to the execution chamber, burst through the door. Sir, the governor's office. They're sending. Is it a court order? They're trying, but the paperwork. Is it a court order, yes or no? Not yet. 10 more minutes, they said. The warden looked at the clock. 5:56 p.m. 4 minutes until the scheduled execution. If the court order didn't arrive by 6 p.m. exactly, he was legally obligated to proceed. At 5:57 p.m., Margaret looked at her children one last time. Sarah had her hands pressed against the glass, praying desperately. Rachel was sobbing. James had his head in his hands. Thomas was on his phone, calling someone, anyone who could help. Margaret felt peace. If Jesus wanted her to die today, she trusted him. If he wanted her to live, he would make a way. At 5:58 p.m., the executioner's hand moved to the injection button. At 5:59 p.m., every phone in the prison began ringing simultaneously. The warden's office, the deputy's cell, the guards' radios, the execution chamber landline. The warden grabbed the execution chamber phone. Yes. He listened. His hand began shaking. Say that again. Repeat that for the record. He listened again. Then he turned to the executioner. Stop. Stop the execution. Executive order from the governor. Full pardon pending investigation. The clock on the wall clicked to 6 p.m. The executioner's hand froze 1 inch from the injection button. Margaret exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. What? She whispered. The warden's voice was shaking. Margaret Hartwell, by executive order of the governor, your execution is hereby halted. Evidence has come to light proving your innocence. David Kane has been arrested for the murders you were convicted of. Jessica Torres has provided a full confession and documentary evidence. You are being granted a full pardon pending official exoneration. The room was silent. Then, from the witness room, Sarah's voice. Thank you, Jesus. The technicians began removing the 4 lines from Margaret's arms, unstrapping her from the gurney. She sat up slowly, dizzy, unable to process what was happening. I'm not dying. No, ma'am, the warden said, and for the first time in 28 years of corrections work, he was crying. You're not dying. You're going home. Margaret looked up at the ceiling. Tears streamed down her face. You said I wouldn't die today, she whispered. You were right. You were right. At 6:15 p.m., Margaret was unshackled completely. The execution chamber door opened, and her 4 children burst through. Sarah reached her first, threw her arms around her mother, and held her so tightly Margaret could barely breathe. Mama, Mama, he saved you. He saved you. Then Rachel. Then Thomas. Then even James, who hadn't touched his mother in 17 years, wrapped his arms around all of them. They stood there in the execution chamber, the place where Margaret was supposed to die, holding each other and crying. I'm sorry, Margaret kept saying. I'm so sorry. For everything. For all the years I wasn't there. For choosing everything else over you. I'm sorry. We know, Mom, Thomas said, his voice breaking. We know. The exoneration took 19 days. David Kane, faced with Jessica's testimony, the forensic evidence, and FBI investigators who found the buried research data, confessed to everything. He had orchestrated the entire frame-up. He had murdered 127 children to drive up stock prices through a complex insurance fraud scheme. He had planned to discover the problem 6 months later, release a fix, and be hailed as a savior while making another $1 billion. He had used Margaret's arrogance, her focus on profits over people, her trust in him, to build the perfect scapegoat. The media exploded. The woman who had been the most hated person in America was suddenly a victim. A martyr. The ice queen who had melted in a prison cell and found redemption. Margaret's assets were unfrozen, her accounts restored. She was offered her company back. She was offered book deals worth millions. She was offered speaking engagements, television interviews, a biopic. She declined everything. On December 31st, 2024, Margaret Hartwell walked out of prison a free woman. But she wasn't a billionaire anymore. During the 5 years of appeals and asset freezing, most of her fortune had been liquidated for victim compensation. Legal fees ate up most of the rest. When the final accounting was done, Margaret had $127,000 left. Exactly $1,000 for each child who had died. She kept $7,000. She donated the other $120,000 to a foundation supporting the families of the 127 victims. She walked out of the prison with a small bag of belongings, the wooden cross around her neck, and nothing else. Her 4 children were waiting at the gate. They had rented a small 2-bedroom apartment in a modest neighborhood. Nothing like the penthouse Margaret once owned. Basic furniture, second-hand dishes, a shared bathroom. "It's not much," Sarah said, "but it's home, and we're together." Margaret looked at the tiny apartment, then at her children. Then she smiled, a real smile, the kind she hadn't smiled in decades. "It's perfect." They celebrated New Year's Eve together. The 5 of them. Pizza from a local shop. Sparkling cider instead of champagne. Watching the countdown on a small television. When midnight struck, they held each other. "New year," Rachel whispered. "New life." "New everything," Margaret agreed. 6 months later, Margaret found work at a free clinic in a low-income neighborhood. Not as a doctor, she wasn't qualified for that, but as a pharmaceutical consultant. She used her 35 years of knowledge to help doctors navigate drug interactions, find cheaper alternatives for patients who couldn't afford expensive medications, and identify dangerous combinations before they caused harm. She made $32,000 a year, lived in a studio apartment, took the bus to work. She had never been happier in her life. Sarah stayed in the United States instead of returning to Kenya. She opened a medical clinic for uninsured families. Margaret volunteered there 3 days a week. Rachel got a job as an addiction counselor. 2 years sober now. She and Margaret had lunch every Sunday. Thomas quit his corporate law job, started working in public defense, representing people who couldn't afford attorneys. James took the longest to come around. But 6 months after Margaret's release, he showed up at her apartment. Didn't say much. Just, "I'm thinking of changing my name back to Hartwell. If that's okay with you." Margaret cried. It would be an honor. Every Sunday they had family dinner. All 5 of them. In Margaret's tiny apartment or Sarah's small house. They cooked together, talked, laughed, shared their lives. The things Margaret had missed for 35 years while building an empire. One evening in June, Margaret was walking home from the clinic. The sun was setting. She passed a small park and saw a flower bed. Roses. Dozens of them. Pink and white and red, blooming perfectly. She stopped. The scent hit her. Overwhelming. Beautiful. She knelt down beside them, touched one of the petals gently, and she felt it. That warmth. That presence. The same one from the cell. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for showing me what really matters. Thank you for my children. Thank you for this life." For just a moment, she smelled it. Sawdust and olive oil. Impossible. Real. She smiled, wiped her eyes, stood up. A young mother walked past, pushing a stroller. The baby inside was laughing at something. Pure, innocent joy. Margaret watched them. Thought of the 127 children. Thought of Emma, who loved horses. Lee, who wanted to be an astronaut. Michael, who played violin. "I can't bring them back," she said quietly to the roses, to the one who had walked through prison walls to see her. "But I can make sure their deaths weren't meaningless. I can spend every day I have left protecting other children, using what I know for good instead of profit." She continued walking home. The sun set behind her, painting the sky in gold and pink. In her pocket, she carried the wooden cross. Always. A reminder of the daughter who never stopped praying, of the faith that moved mountains, of the moment everything changed. 2 years after her release, Margaret received a letter. No return address. Simple envelope. Inside was a single page. Handwritten. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You were given much, and much was taken away. You were broken, and in your brokenness, I made you whole. You were condemned, and I set you free. Not because you earned it, but because you surrendered. Continue the work. Serve the suffering. Love your children. Use your gifts for healing, not empire. And know that the 127 are with me. They are whole. They are loved. They forgive you. And they are glad that their deaths, though tragic, led to your transformation and the saving of countless others. I am with you always. Your King and Savior. Margaret read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in a small box with the wooden cross. She never told anyone about the letter. It was between her and him. But from that day forward, every time someone asked her how she survived death row, how she found peace after being falsely convicted, how she rebuilt her life from nothing, she gave the same answer. I asked to see Jesus Christ. And he came. That's the only explanation I have. That's the only one I need. Some people believed her. Most didn't. Some thought she had a breakdown. Some thought it was metaphorical. Margaret didn't care. She knew what she saw. She knew who visited her cell. She knew whose hand pulled her back from death. And she spent every day of the rest of her life living in gratitude for that impossible night when heaven broke into a prison cell and everything changed. Before you go, I want to invite you to join our community of faith and hope. A place where people from all over the world share stories of impossible redemptions and miraculous transformations. If this story touched your heart, click below and become part of our prayer circle today. And if you made it all the way to the end of Margaret's story, do something for me. Write in the comments, "Wooden cross, the object a daughter gave that changed everything." I want to see how many hearts this story truly reached. Every time I read wooden cross in the comments, I'll know that one more person believes that redemption is possible. That second chances are real. That even in our darkest moments, when everything seems lost, hope can break through. If this story moved you, subscribe and turn on notifications. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to change. That mercy is real. That love wins.